Great. Well, welcome to the Rockport Select Board meeting for Monday, December 13th. Thank you for joining us today. I'll call the meeting to order. We are here. John Strand is away on business, so we will proceed as planned. First, I will turn it over to John for your town manager's report.
Well, it's been a pretty busy, almost 6 weeks here since the last time you met, and we came back. We're back together now. So there's a pretty lengthy report. I won't read it all, obviously. There's a number of highlights. Probably I'll bring to mind here tonight. Obviously, the most notable change is the change in office hours at the lobby hours at the town office. Again, it's a trial. We had some staffing changes in the office, which have caused some changes both in the planning and codes office, and then that's of course impacting the main office. So part of this is also feeding into a study I had done over about a 6 to 7 week period of, what is our traffic, what sort of transactions are we doing during our busiest time of the year. And so it really showed there's a precipitous drop after 4 p.m. And that was during that busy time. So on a trial basis, since I started, there's been a real desire to try to make sure we're closing out our daily receipts at the end of the day. And we tried a number of different methods and couldn't really get to where we needed to be. So thought is to try this for a period. If that works, great. But I can't imagine this will proceed into the spring months or when a little bit later hours of light. The Christmas lights are helpful that we have up, and they keep things nice and bright and cheery for everyone, but sunlight's a little different.
I have a question with regards to that, because, I've been one that has wanted to provide more service rather than less.
Yeah.
And this appears to be headed in that direction a little bit.
Yeah.
And I understand about closing out the books at the end of the day.
Right.
But we have 3 people, we have 3 drawers. Is it a possibility that 2 of those get closed out at 4 o'clock and the third one gets turned in the very next morning with the end of the day stuff?
You can do that.
I'm just asking
Yeah,
because,
you can do that.
we're cutting back on time, and I understand that.
Right. So we're cutting back on time. So during that busy time, just to kind of lay out what we're talking about, we had 96 contacts, which was either a phone call or someone coming into the office during that busy time, which is both tax due dates as well as our election. So you've got absentee voters, you've got, all of those items going on. We had 96 contacts, 2/3 of which were, or I should say a third of which were phone calls. So you had, over that 7 week period, you had 64 people that came in from the hours of 4 to 5 o'clock. So during our busy time, we were talking on average 2 people a day, if that. And so now, obviously, as we enter these winter months, which are our slowest transactional periods of the year, we have probably 3.5 months, and then, of course, we start going to tax due date season coming around into the spring. So the chance was this was an opportunity to see what does 4 o'clock look like. As far as I can tell, we've had an 8 to 5 schedule here for as long as I can remember, and probably you might agree with that, Mark. So the thought was, let's try it, and then when the summer months come, I think doing some different things in terms of scheduling, whether it's one's open a little bit later with code enforcement. So yeah, you're absolutely, you can do some different things, but
I think it gets confusing if we do this now, we do something else in the spring. As you know, I'm in favor. I mean, the only one that it really affects by closing things out is the clerk's office.
Right.
Everybody else gets to reap the benefits of not being available to the public by virtue of them closing.
Have you received any feedback?
No, I haven't received any negative feedback at all. And I would say, I agree. We don't want it to be confusing. I would say there's a number of folks that think that we already close at 4 because most other town offices close at 4 or 4:30 in the region. And so, it's definitely not something that I think will burn in people's brains at this point to say, oh, this is what we do at 4 o'clock and this is how it goes. But I also don't want it burned in anyone's brain that we're not open until 6, because I think that there's, and the opportunity to say in the summer months when code enforcement needs are higher, there's an opportunity to meet with code enforcement. We also don't want to have it fixed on the other end as well, because if we do want to try for one day that's later, having some flexibility and trial and error, I suppose, is what I'm.
And that's
looking
good. I
for.
mean, I
Yeah.
just, I'm a proponent of more
Yeah,
versus less, but I understand, the finance side of things, so.
yeah,
Well, and I think that was part of one of our audits early on too, right? Was that we couldn't get
Right.
our numbers in timely because when you close at 5,
right.
it doesn't give you the time to do the reconciliation,
And-
so.
Yeah, and that's what we had started to do, is to
Yeah.
try to close the books on it at the end of the day, but really the closeout, it wasn't completed until the start of the next day. And then that means all your day's receipts are off by a day all the way through. And Megan and I looked at it in September, after a trial, about 4 to 6 weeks. It just wasn't doing what we needed it to do. So unfortunately, it meant a later day, and how do you get there? It just so happened that with the changes in office personnel, it was necessitated by trying to provide some flexibility there for the whole office. But I would also add, though, that the office is open. People can call if they have particular issues, if they're unable for some reason to, get in by 4 o'clock, call. Talk with Linda, talk with Shay and Wyatt. There are times when we can be more flexible. We're a small community, especially in the wintertime. We're even smaller than we are in July. And, those 3 folks, but also all the departments, codes, planning, assessing, we're here to help. And just because the time on the door doesn't say so, doesn't mean we aren't able to respond, whether it's an email on a weekend or what have you. So that's what we've talked about, certainly in that 4 to 5 hour, that we're going to go do what we can above and beyond in that time, to try to make sure there's as limited a loss of contact as possible. So that's obviously the predominant thread. Just going through some of the bigger points here. Obviously, we have the statistical analysis work began about 2 weeks ago, and Carrie is working through those pieces of information. I'm expecting we'll probably have more of a community-wide conversation with some letters to residents, not until at the earliest January, late January. So I know people are probably interested in where my value is going, what's going to happen. There's still a lot of work to be done on that, so stay tuned. Abby's here, and so obviously we had some folks that I think were excited to go to the harbor on Saturday night in the rain, and that didn't work out so well. And then on Sunday we had some folks that showed up at the harbor, and
Beautiful, and it looked
it was
just the most beautiful night ever. But unfortunately,
It happens, Abby. You can't control the weather or the weather report or fire marshal know.
fire marshals, yeah,
requirements. You tried.
we're trying to. Denise and I had a great chat before we started about how do we reach out to people. It's really, really hard.
standard, like, what's the,
Yeah.
where do we, that's a good
Right.
question,
Yeah.
I'd
So-
love to.
So we got to figure that out. I mean, I think as a town, it's not a Holiday on the Harbor issue. It's not even a Robinson Drive road washed out issue. It's how do we talk to people? And people are so siloed, and we've got the masks are covering half of our faces, and there's just so much that prevents us and limits us from talking to each other. And so how do we find a better way to do that and make sure everyone's aware of what's going on? I think there was a lot of efforts to try to do the best we can. There were definitely gaps in that. So trying to figure out what those gaps are, how do we make sure that I'm not saying we're going to go to Monday night on Sunday. Let's just hope that Sunday is as good as
Fingers crossed. That's right.
right.
Fingers
So yeah, and
And sort of on that front, just so people who might be watching,
right, yeah,
I think Megan and I will work on developing an email list of town residents and look at ways if that's, I don't mean to,
Yeah, no,
Jump
we
the
were
gun on
talking
that.
about that, yeah, yeah.
and look at what, I mean, not that I'll put it on Megan, she has a list that I can take and build from that.
Yeah.
And find other ways to get residents' emails
Yeah.
who want to be informed of things from the town.
Right, absolutely. So, and so, on that note, and the one last little note I had about the harbor, one of our lobstermen, Danny Dodge, passed away, late November, and, so, and it just, Linda Clancy wrote a really great kind of
She
remembrance
did,
of
it was very
of,
nice.
of moving his boat and all that, and was really kind of a touching thing. Danny grew up kind of across the street from me. He's a little bit older than I, but obviously it's a small community, and we all know each other, and so we're taking care of things while his family is trying to work through their next steps, and so as we move through that, it would be helpful if we could, hold off any sort of charges that the town would have in trying to store his gear while his family works through that. So
I think that's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
I mean, he lived in this community a really long time and, community, was part of the fishing community, so I think that's the right thing to do.
It's a sad thing, particularly if you know the person, so. And they've got enough on their plate right now with that and with the holidays coming up, and I think it would be an extremely good gesture on our part if we would ensure that the bill doesn't go out
Yes.
for the storage, until they get their feet under them, see what happens.
Okay. And then just kind of look at very high level here, library, incredible numbers in terms of visitation. 33,000 people have gone through the doors there. Some of the same people, obviously.
Right.
It's not, but we know it's not the same person 33,000
right,
times.
exactly,
So
right.
somewhere between 33,000 different people and one person 33,000 times have gone
Right.
into the library. That's a tremendous number. I mean, that's just mind-boggling. And then 44,000 items in circulation. So that's very exciting. Again, I don't want to belabor all of this,
Maybe the
but
New Heights.
oh yeah, let's talk, yeah, that'd be great. So so the RES work is beginning in earnest. New Height Group has put together a survey that they are planning to spread to Rockport residents and community members here over the next 6 weeks, month to 6 weeks, that will ask questions about what are their goals, what are their vision, what do they hope to see from that property, and I think we've certainly heard a lot of that, and Eric and the RES task force worked a great deal in the earlier months. Doug just came in, so he's obviously been part of that and newly part of that conversation as well. There is, I think, some exciting possibilities there, but trying to get that base of information as well. So they're working on that. I expect that will go out probably in the next couple weeks, and there'll also be following the gathering of that information, there'll be a public meeting upstairs in the Opera House to sort of talk about the findings and then really work through that information into something that's a little bit sharper and more refined of an idea.
If you can find out from them a time frame to which they will be going around and visiting people or inquiring of people, if you can include that not only on our website, but the Facebook page, plus the newsletter,
Yeah.
so that we can reach out to enough people to ensure that they don't get spooked because somebody's coming
right.
around asking
Yeah.
questions.
Agree.
And that was a big problem, I think, in the conversation with the budget committee, because that was the one thing that I heard is, we don't feel like we were heard. And however, whatever reason, we were just talking about how to contact people, right? It's kind of the same issues over and over again. How do we try to get a bigger and bigger audience is really the goal. So, yeah, and the idea would be not unlike the comprehensive plan effort, to have a QR code so that people can, if you wanted to, not saying everyone here is tech, but
Thank you.
take the QR code and and it'll come up on your phone and you
Right.
can fill it out. So, anyway. Audit work, the audit will be going on in January now. We'd hoped it would be last week and this week, but some illnesses and whatnot got in the way. I'm hoping that before your next meeting on, I think it's January 7th?
10th.
10th,
Have it in the front.
to meet with the auditor, and,
Yes, January 10th.
have some, there we go, thanks. So you can get your audit from fiscal year end 20. So that would be almost 18 months before, but again, that's where we are at. So you can have a chance to talk with the auditor, answer any questions you may have. So potential to have a workshop that evening for you all to somewhat
Okay.
work through those ideas. So, I think that's really about it, but, let me, last thing, in terms of FEMA, we're continuing the process of working through, trying to gain all the information that FEMA is looking for reimbursement for Robinson Drive and all the damage we had. What has become increasingly, clear is that the impact of the event or the damage that occurred in Biddeford is holding up the rest of the state. I mean, basically, we have Midcoast, and then we have Biddeford, and we're it, and we're the whole. And that project, I think, is somewhere between $3 and $4 million. There is some attempts to try to have different pockets pay for that repair, not FEMA. If that happens, we could be left out in the cold.
Because we don't have enough money.
Right. So I reached out, I found this, we had the brief chat on Friday. I reached out to Biddeford City Manager, and hopefully we can maybe compare notes and work together on this, because we need to make sure that all of our, this program is set up for this precise purpose. And simply because there aren't 150 towns in Maine that are as impacted as we are,
Right.
this is what it's here for. So, we have an uphill battle at this point, but we're gonna keep getting everything together. We have, MEMA has said over and over, they're so impressed with what Megan has put together in terms of the information and the data. But we have to keep pushing, and this is going to be, I fear this might become a political conversation as opposed to one that's really about the policies and how it's set up, so.
Well, thank you for
Do what we
keeping
can.
on that, and thank you, Megan, for putting all of that together. I know that's not easy.
Along the lines of reimbursement, and it come to mind because, in signing the warrants, I see where there are certain things that are purchased for training. Whether it's goods or whether it's equipment. And in this case, I think last year, when we got $7,000 or $8,000 back from Maine Municipal because of our good behavior and our good training records and the things that we've done to get where we are, I think we may have authorized that money to be set aside to be used for future training expenses, so that we don't always have to keep tapping the well. And I just see where we've got January 11th, we have an annual employee safety training. So anything that can be used out of that reserve to pay for anything associated with that training or any future safety trainings would be greatly appreciated. So, it isn't much, but I think that's why we set it aside, so that we can keep feeding ourselves from that versus the taxpayers continually.
And we have, Megan and Diane are attending the type of training you never want to attend tomorrow on how to work through the MMA's new training program. And so hopefully there'll be more information to come from that, but we wish them luck as they go through that, what will be a incredibly thrilling and exciting conversation tomorrow. So, best of luck to Diane and Megan.
And John, before we move on, while I can't attend on Friday, I did just want to congratulate Yetta on her graduation from Police Academy. I know 18 weeks is a significant commitment. I know that's not an easy feat, having someone in my family that's been through that. So congratulations to Yetta, and it looks like she's won the Randall Parsons Ironman Award. I'm not surprised by that. It'll be good to get her back, and I think she was back this weekend. I heard her on the scanner, so I think she's back in action already. But congratulations to Yetta on her accomplishment.
Absolutely.
All right. With that, do we have any public input to non-agenda items? Seeing none. Any amendments to the agenda? Seeing none, we will go to our consent agenda. There's a couple of items on our consent agenda, which include our minutes from November 1st. We also do have 2 resignations from our Comprehensive Plan Committee, Jeff Parker and Sally Cook.
I move the board approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Okay, any discussion?
Other than thank you to,
Yes, thank you to
Absolutely.
Jeff and to Sally. All right, all in favor? Okay, passes. All right. Next, we are acting on a committee application for Marcia Steinglass for Comprehensive Plan Committee. So welcome, Marcia. If you want to come up and tell us a little bit about you, for those who may not know you.
Oh, okay, I didn't know that was gonna.
Don't be shy.
Let's see, I came to Rockport when I was 25 and settled at One Ship Street. I still live there with Vic, and I've been in the past on the Budget Committee and the Library Committee, and I'm presently on the Library Committee.
Great. Well, we are excited and we are thankful for you to join us. I know you have a lot to offer. So with that,
I move the board appoint Marcia Steinglass to the Comprehensive Plan Committee as a citizen. There are no terms.
Second.
any further discussion? All in favor? Great. Thank you very much, Marcia. We look forward to working with you. I know Orion will be very happy to work with you and get you up to speed.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a great
Thank you.
night. Okay, our next item is to act on committee bylaws. So we did have a lot of bylaws that were modified after the adoption of our remote participation policy. There were a few groups that were not able to attend the initial meeting and have held subsequent meetings in order to have their quorums available and ready to make changes to their bylaws. So anything else, John, on that?
No, nothing at all. I'm excited that we almost have 100% across the board. Great work.
Yeah, and in looking at these, the only thing that changed is their ability to conduct electronic conference calls, et cetera, in the event of emergencies, correct? No other changes were required? Okay.
I move the board approve the committee bylaws for the Planning Board, Camden Rockport Pathways Committee, and the Comprehensive Plan.
Hold on one second. There was something changed on the comprehensive plan committee.
Okay.
Oh.
Yeah, sorry. I was giving the details to Marcia since she knew when to meet. And I was getting contact information, so I couldn't pay attention. It's just about the memberships, let me pull it up.
On page 1,
Yeah,
yeah.
on how it was written was one member from each of these boards and committees. Well, in a couple of months, we're gonna be really digging into content of it. And if we look at the logistics of it, Jeff Parker wasn't a part of it, and we haven't had anybody from the ZBA. So rather than having one person from them, we're just turning it to recommending that they participate. And right now, we're not saying they don't or they shouldn't, it's just, rather than having a defined person, it's just that committee, somebody or multiples can participate in it. That'll free up our logistics of making things happen. and we changed, we put a range of 5 to 10 members on the committee. If it gets too large, it becomes cumbersome on getting a quorum. We've had a number of meetings where we couldn't have a quorum.
Yes.
So
I
the
will.
smaller the group, the better,
More flexibility.
a lot more flexibility.
Yes,
And
agree.
the faster we'll be able to move through it.
Yep.
Fortunately, right now, we're waiting on 2020 census data to formally finalize all the way. There's still a couple bits of data that I'm looking for. So I really want to make sure the 2020 census data is concluded in that. Once we have that, we're really going to be moving full steam ahead with it, so. But,
I think the motion can stand as long as
Okay.
everybody understands the change.
Yes, it can.
perfect.
I can second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Okay. Okay, our next item is act on the committee work plan, the ordinance review committee. So John, Ryan, who's gonna walk us through that?
I'll turn it to Orion. He wrote a dazzling memo, so
Yeah.
I'll let him take it from here.
I sent him bullet points, and he was like, turn it into a memo. I'm like, okay. So this, for the most part, this is a combination of items that the planning board has found to be an issue, just leaving them to try to interpret something. And most of it is just correlation between subdivision ordinance, land use ordinance, and sewer ordinance. Those 3 ordinances, for one, should correlate together. Right now, we had a subdivision that came in, and we couldn't require them to connect to sewer because of how it's all written. In the sewer ordinance, it refers to a comprehensive plan, but the comprehensive plan doesn't state anything about a sewer ordinance or sewer. And then the sewer ordinance, it just has some setbacks, so only 2 lots of that subdivision would have been able to hook in. We couldn't really push on it. So for the most part, that's the bulk of it, and then the wireless telecommunication one.
So is the idea that we would take out the reference to the comprehensive plan in the sewer ordinance and just
Yeah, and
to do that?
for the sewer ordinance, yeah, we would adjust it slightly there, and then, for our expansion that we're trying to do on Route 90, if we get funded and everything, to get Maine Water Company to hook on. I've talked with, Nate, from Woodward and Kern, and he said that a lot of, municipalities have in their ordinance a private line, and I'm gonna talk to him about that a little bit more, because they have a line that goes from 17 down that they could potentially use if it's in working order.
A private sewer line.
It would be their private line hooking in, so nobody abutting it could tie into it. And that would give us access to Maine Water Company. But how the current ordinance reads, they wouldn't be able to do that. So we have to get creative with that. And I would involve our sewer engineer, Nate, and see if he has anybody else he can recommend to provide good language to ensure that it's done correctly.
Could we be expecting something to come to the wastewater commissioners as well
Yeah.
with regards to changes that might need to be made
Yes.
so that we can have more teeth in the installation of?
Yeah, can you repeat that again? The first bit, I didn't.
Will
quite-
there'll be something come to the wastewater commissioners, I'm assuming, about changes that we might need to make
Yes,
to ensure that we have more teeth when it comes to hooking into our system when it goes
Absolutely.
by? Meaning new hookups, not existing.
right,
Or making you change.
Mhm.
So there will be something coming?
yes.
And is the sewer ordinance something that the wastewater commissioners look at? How is that process if?
Yeah.
I would,
Should
at
be.
a minimum,
You would
y'all should
think
have,
so.
Yeah, it should be.
at a minimum, y'all should have an input in it, in terms of that. But I think it would still go
The select board
to
still.
the select board, but the select board is,
We're the wastewater
We're the
commission,
wastewater
so
commissioners.
either way,
Yeah.
Right.
we just change
No,
from
get
one
it.
meeting type to another, so,
No.
yes.
yeah. Good question.
Yeah, well,
Interesting.
that's to be found out with
Yeah.
the process.
Okay,
Okay.
I have a question.
go for it.
Outside of those, I know I've mentioned it a few times, what about talking about houses and buildings that aren't yet completed, and we have building permits that just kind of hang and languish forever?
Yeah.
Is this something we're looking at or going to look at soon? Because I'm personally kind of tired of looking at unfinished buildings.
Sure. So once we're done with our comprehensive plan, then we're really gonna tear into a lot more of the ordinance. So right now, this is just
Okay.
some items that we have that will make the planning board move a lot smoother,
All right,
for the most part. And then just some language, like some references, that go throughout that don't exist anymore, those need to be cleaned up. And that's just from previous ordinance amendments that weren't carried over. So just cleaning it up even further. But
so we will be getting to some of those.
I can't speak to the specifics of that, but
Right.
once the comprehensive plan is finished, I'm sure something will be in there alluding to that. And then
Okay.
an ordinance would be written to match that.
And what's the target deadline? Are we going for a June ballot on the comprehensive plan?
Not
or
this June,
November?
probably November.
Okay.
No. No. That's the goal.
Anything else, John? Any other comments on that?
No, there was some confusion in terms of the US Cellular.
Yes.
And just to reiterate, for those listening at home, the board received an application for them to take action to place an item on, I think, the November ballot,
November, right.
to allow for a cell tower to be placed, and change the ordinance therefore. You all made the decision at that point to pass this decision off to the ORC. And so here it is on this list. This is the process
Well,
working.
because we knew, I want to make sure
Yeah.
that we didn't make the decision to pass it on. We knew that that's the path it had
That's
to
the
take,
path.
right? It had to
Right.
take that, so.
Yeah.
Yes, all right.
I mean,
I just didn't want you to think we passed it off.
well, no, but you
We're happy
have
to do
the,
our job, but
you have, right, ultimately, they're a committee of yours to refine and then bring it
Yes,
back to
and bring
you.
it
So
back.
you could have done it, but it would not have been wise, and I would not have recommended you do so. So thankfully, we have a group of able-bodied and very wise individuals who can sit down and get this into a good place, and then hopefully back up for the voters to consider.
And do we think that will make the June?
That one,
The
that
June
one
ballot.
should make the June ballot, and onto that as well, I'm gonna try to find some wireless engineers that can add some more insight that are a third party, because this is, I mean, it's just US Cellular's opinion on it.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanna make sure that whatever we do come up with is not tailored to US Cellular, I just want it to
Yep.
be what it should be.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, we don't want to repeat it every time somebody decides they need to put a tower in.
Right.
Tower, right, exactly.
Right.
and I know some members of the ORC have all the members of the ORC seen this work plan? I mean, I'm not sure which order. things
So
have happened
I've
in,
met
so-
with Richard Remsen, the chair, and he said, come up with a list, meet with John. John and I have talked about what I'm potentially gonna put on there.
Okay,
And then it comes to y'all for your final approval to
Mm-hmm.
sanction the ORC to do this work. And then I meet with the ORC for them to do this work.
okay.
All right. Any other further questions or comments? All right, do we have a motion?
I move the board accept the work plan for the ordinance review committee.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Okay, thank you. Okay, moving on, we have our act on our 2021-2022 capital improvement plan.
I know you'll have a lot to say, but I'm not ready to,
I don't think I'm ready to act on this either, to be honest with you, but walk us through what you were thinking about.
Well, so we had I think, a great meeting here.
Yes, we did.
I want to say last month at this point. It could have been several months ago, but let's say it's
I think it was
last month.
yeah.
Members of the budget committee and former capital planning committee met here, and we talked about all these various needs and discussed, these different projects and the new projects, the projects that I've been, really encouraging our department heads to really move forward and think hard about the future of their departments and where we're going and where we're headed. And so we had a great conversation about that and where all those pieces all fit together. And so, obviously, in terms of the bigger picture, and really to, the point that the two of you are making here, obviously, what we want to have is to have the priorities of the select board set, so that the manager can then say, okay, this is a high priority. Let's do what we can to try to fit that into our operating budget. This is a low priority, we worry about that a little bit later. And that's really where we're starting the conversation here, tonight, or finishing it, if that was where we were. So I think how I would probably, phrase this is that I don't think the relative value of a 2 versus a 3 is necessarily where we're driving. I think we're really trying to get the broad strokes of where we are on various items. And certainly we spent over half of our conversation the other night, or I guess last month, discussing roads and how, at least how I see roads. That doesn't mean that's your priority, but at least for my perspective in starting out here, it's a high priority. But I'm just, I'm the manager, you're the select board. It's your vision is the one that we want to make sure is heard. So, I think that's part of the conversation, but there's a list of 26 projects, I think, in total. I wouldn't expect you to go through and rank, 1 through 26, which is your favorite, which is your least favorite, or most important versus least important. I think what we're hoping for is that we'd have enough of a ranking prior to this point that we could go through and say, okay, well, by looking at everyone's scores, these seem to be a priority, these seem to be of lower priority, and we could go through that. If we're not there tonight, we're not there tonight. I just, our budgets, the department head budgets are due December 17th, so the end of this week. And we'll be working to start to compile that budget for release to you all on February 15th.
If any of these capital improvement items are in any of the department heads' budgets, can you make sure that we know that it's not camouflaged in with something else, so that we know?
We'll make sure that it's included in the manager's letter for the budget.
True, but I mean, if you can look at it in one of the line items,
Yeah.
so that it's very visible that it's in there.
Yep,
And then we can say, oh, yeah, okay,
yeah. Yeah.
or adjust it accordingly.
Call it,
So do you
draw
think,
that line.
do you
yeah.
think for this, it would be helpful for me, because I get distracted easily, is, Mark, I know you were away, so I don't know if you want to go through and do this and get it to Megan. But then Megan, if you did the average and then ranked them for us?
The problem with the average is the numbers aren't similar enough in category, because that was my original thought.
Okay.
Right.
But they're not similar enough in category to average them out and come up with an
Okay.
appropriate. Probably at this point, because you guys do have a lot that necessarily weren't straight across the board the same.
Yep.
It might be worth having a workshop, because you'll see the other attachment that was included. Eric and Denise had
That's
additional
comments,
comments on top of. And I think that it warrants having those
I
conversations.
think you're probably right. Yeah.
So maybe it doesn't hurt to have another workshop.
I mean, and I will, but a lot of these, I think, and we've said before, I realize that we've used the dollar value of 5,000 as the threshold to include things on the list, but there are some things that are just, ought to be normal department head budget requests. And that way you can thin out this list so that it's much easier for those on the committee, the capital committee, to look at it and say, this is more brick and mortar things rather than buying a on-the-road trailer or a police cruiser SUV. Those are budgetary things that the department head can justify when he submits his budget. And it shouldn't necessarily be something that the capital improvement committee really gives a darn about. I mean, they might, but I'm just saying there are things that should be department head generated because they need it, and it's in their budget. And it could take, it could take this 3 pages of
Down to one,
items
yeah.
and maybe make it down to 1.
Yeah.
But
So
that's
do we
just,
want to do, if we did a workshop in early January, is that too late, Megan, for you with your budget planning?
Well, John has to have his budget done by the second week in February. So if you guys had a workshop before your next meeting,
Right, if
and
we
then
did
Right.
we could have a finalized plan ready for your next meeting. then-
Okay.
I mean,
Yeah, I agree with you on that, but unfortunately, the rules say,
well, it's a rule
But for-
that,
but for what we're gonna, if we could look at this without, and take
We don't
out all
care.
those,
Yeah, we just-
Take out
We
all
can
the things that
ignore
are
all
done,
of
already in,
these.
the sixes already that are
Yeah.
in process and that maybe.
I mean, the police cruiser reserve. I mean,
it has to be there.
you gotta put money in there. Or sell your old one and use the money for it to fund the reserve. But it's not something that people need to
should be
waste
second guessing.
Right.
a minute of their time putting a 1 beside it, or,
Well, part of it is we've done a good job. That's the other part of that is we've had years of doing the right thing with trucks.
Oh,
Fire
yeah.
trucks, police cruisers, public works trucks. We've done a really good job of that. And the same methodology that you would use for buildings that, and roads, we're trying to get around on that right now. We've been doing on the truck side of it. So it seems like it is, as you said, it's something you build in your budget and people just say, that's just part of what it takes to operate. I think in some communities, maybe that doesn't happen, but we've done a good job and we've been able to yeah, that makes sense. Why wouldn't you have, this in or that in?
and I have no doubt when the fire chief, the highway foreman, or the police chief
Yeah.
comes in and says, we need new radars for the police car, or we need new light bars for the police car, fine.
Right.
But it's in your budget, and I don't need to waste, or
Yeah.
we don't need to waste our time looking at it, because it's just something that ought to be budgeted.
Okay, so we'll schedule a workshop early January. We'll table this discussion or, I guess, adoption, until next meeting. Does that work?
Can I just get some clarification on the 6, because it was defined as underway, but then it seemed like some of those projects, to me, underway meant we were already in the process of doing it, so there wasn't any real point in,
Scoring it, that's
Analyzing
how
it.
I took it too.
but then it looked like some of those are,
Well,
that wasn't the case, and maybe it's like Mark was saying, it's just part of.
well, I'm thinking, like the columbarium, it's on there. And so if I'm gonna come down to that when we have our workshop, I'm gonna look at Jonathan, I'm gonna say, hey,
Where is it?
when's it gonna be on the ground?
Yeah,
Because it was in for this,
And the one before.
Right.
And the one before.
so I mean, we've got the money to do it, so now we need to set it,
So,
and that's what we should find out more about
Yeah.
the investment committee amount for that and how that works.
that was, when I did my scoring, that was exactly how I took it was, these are items, the gas range, for example,
Right,
and that was when
exactly.
we've funded,
Yeah,
but it's not purchased.
I think if we funded it, does it really need to be even on the list? I
Yeah,
mean,
I
if
know.
we've already got the money set aside, could we have a
I'd
list
say
that
no.
says, we have the money for these, here's the list?
Yeah.
And
But
here's
not-
the list that we don't? And it's not taking it off your capital improvement plan, but just saying, maybe score these with something that says we have the money already, or make the line green or something.
Or we'll just
Which
take
we
off
can
the list
certainly
of-
do, but like the cases to the equipment, we don't have the money
No,
for
no,
that
no.
yet, and that directly impacts what the capital budget is
Yeah.
when we go to the budget process. So it's important that when we're looking at what the capital investment for the year is that we're including all of the capital
Yeah.
investment, and that includes the vehicles that we replace.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think we're all saying the same thing, we're just, there's a smaller list where our prioritization will help
Right, versus
as
things.
John and the
yeah.
department heads develop their budget, whereas some of this stuff, we don't care. I
Yeah.
mean,
Well, if we have the money for the range, and we have the money for the columbarium, and we have those funds, it would just help me if I know, even if you just made the word green or told me which ones, and I'll go through and make the words green for you. Whatever it helps to take it off your plate even, I don't care.
I think what you're saying too, Eric, and I think Mark's saying the same thing, all of you are, it's really about trying to tee up the items that you feel like you have to make decisions on.
Absolutely.
As
Yes.
opposed
Think about,
to
yeah.
looking at the whole item. So
Agree.
I think we can
Okay.
put that together, so that way you all know
Okay.
where the key pieces are.
So, Megan, who will take care of scheduling the workshop? Is that you? Is that John?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's me.
Okay. So we'll do that for early January, and then we can come back on our January 10th meeting and look to adopt it so that you have everything you need for the budget process.
Sounds great.
Okay.
So,
And
Shane,
if Mark could get me his rankings,
Yep.
then I could include it.
yeah,
Yep, that would be great.
And on the budget, do we have dates yet for the sort of budget process?
Yeah,
Working on it.
okay.
I'm just starting to make some travel plans.
Yes,
and trying
put
to-
those on
You're
our
not allowed to go
calendars.
anywhere.
That's
just-
right.
That's just,
No travel February and March.
no,
That's right.
Ted
The
Lowry
the
here.
two worst months here, but no.
going to Thomaston is on the edge of things, but okay, all
so
right.
I mean, and this is me just taking a quick look down through things again, and I may have missed it, and if I did, fine, but, you know, I think of things like, you know, the town office building, the public safety building, that is still in need of the bricks to be pointed and/or sealed, but that's not on the list. I mean, that, to me, is a capital improvement issue. You know, and I'm on the budget committee, I'm sitting here, and I'm looking through there, and I don't see that listed anywhere. But those are the types of things I would think are more appropriately placed on capital improvement.
Yeah,
You
well,
know.
I think, I don't think you're wrong in that regard. I mean, I think that those maintenance items that are part of living and working in a building have to be handled, you know? I think that's true. I think the point that the conversation came to at that meeting in November was really trying to talk about space and the use of space. And programmatically, where are we headed as a community? You know, so kind of in the same way, I think what you were just saying in terms of, you know, radar and light bars, and those are things we have to do. I was looking at this conversation as the point of saying, we have to look at all of our space right now. Are we using it efficiently? Do we have what we need to do what we're doing? Or to incrementally grow over time? That was a conversation that I don't think we were really having as a community, and I think it's, I mean, certainly the West Rockport Fire Station conversation is occurring, but what about the public safety building? We did an addition there about 15 years ago. We're out of space on the police side of things. We have 2 people in a space that really should be for files at the town office. So it's all those, we have Scott working in a closet like he has for the last 20 years. So, you know, just talking with those things. And that was really the point of that conversation. But you're absolutely right. Take care of what you have. That has to happen.
Yes. All right.
Is that just a matter of that Jason didn't include it on his list? Because I think of like the library put on
Yeah.
reserve, so it's just, it hadn't occurred to him.
Yeah, I think, I mean, I don't think it was.
I don't know who's responsible for that, since it's a shared building.
Right, yeah, there's a little bit of, you know, a little bit of Chief Gagnon, a little bit of Chief Peasley, and,
Yeah.
you know, making sure, hey, what about this and what about that? So, I don't, on the basis of this conversation, I'm sure something will end up in a budget somewhere to talk about that idea, you know? Yeah.
Okay, any other comments on that? I think we know what our next actions are for that.
Yep.
All right, we will move forward to the 21 encumbrances and reserve requests. So enlighten us, John.
Well, this
Megan.
is, so I'll set the stage and then I'll let Megan take it from here. From what I gather in recent years, this is not something that has come before the board, maybe very recent. But in my experience, any encumbrances that the town will bring forward to a new fiscal year need to be made by the select board or municipal officers of the community. So Megan and I had a conversation about that. I'm not sure that if that's always happened or hasn't happened, but these are the items that she and I have identified that need to happen, and I agree with what she's come up with here. So maybe Megan, if you want to go through them briefly.
Sure. So, the first one is for auditing services. Obviously, with COVID and staff changes with our auditor, they weren't able to get it done within our fiscal year. So we've finally received the final audit and their final bill. So my recommendation is to encumber that as to not cut into the money that we budgeted for the audit that will have to happen this year. So that amount will cover the remaining balance to the auditors.
Can I just ask for a clarification? So when you're saying encumber, I mean, presumably we budgeted that money, but we budgeted it for the last budget year? Is that what's
Right.
going on? So it's left, it's in the unassigned fund balance if you didn't do anything, but if you encumber it, it can be used for what it was intended and
Right.
budgeted for. Okay.
Yep. So this would be dedicated to auditing services to pay that bill. So this is the only thing that, once it's encumbered, it's the only thing that it can be used for.
Okay, good. Thank you for that clarification.
The next thing is in the police department safety equipment line. We're recommending to encumber the money that was left there so they can purchase 2 additional tasers. So all officers have their own duty tasers instead of sharing them. The next one is fire department safety equipment. This we're recommending to be encumbered to pay for turnout gear that has been back ordered. We've had a really difficult time getting the equipment that we budgeted for, so this will allow us to pay for the equipment that was intended in last fiscal year's budget. Recommending that in the harbor budget that we move some money that was left in a salary line to put that towards our unfunded liability for accrued benefits, which last year was at $63,000. So this money will help get us down some more without having a budgetary impact. Also recommending that we do the same thing with Public Works overtime that's left from last year to decrease that $63,000 unfunded liability that we have. Public Works professional services, to encumber that to help us pay for engineering costs associated with the October storm or other engineering needs that we may have. Like John alluded to earlier, we're getting very nervous that FEMA won't declare an event. So, I mean, on a $1.5 million bill, this doesn't make a big difference, but it will help. With the Public Works salt money that was left, we had a pretty mild winter last year, so we're recommending to encumber the money that was left and start a reserve that would give us some cushion for treating winter roads. We can't predict what the winter's gonna be like. By state statute, we can overdraw the Public Works Department to treat roads in the winter, but if we had some backup to allow us to cover that instead of overdrawing the budget, I think it's more beneficial than just overdrawing the budget.
I think in the words of Ken McKinley, I don't think he's one that's really in favor of reserves. And does that mean, for instance, that the encumbered money, I mean, I would more think that the encumbered money would be set aside and lessen next year's request by a little bit versus just setting it in a fund somewhere. I mean,
But
I'd have to think of our prior conversations about reserves and our desire to have them.
Reserves are what help you keep your budget
Oh,
steady.
absolutely,
I
but
mean,
this one-
if you had a $30,000 overrun in road treatment for this year,
And you can do
you've
that.
cut that in half already by having this money in a reserve account that you can use. So if that's approved, then we would come back to you in January with an updated reserve policy to reflect that that would be restricted for winter road maintenance. Public Works paving, they weren't able to get all of the paving done for the fiscal year by the end of June. So this is to pay for the work that was completed later on in the summer. And then, for recreation miscellaneous contracts, $10,000, move this to the recreation reserve to go towards CIP items and the items that you guys already approved a few months ago, at the March Jones Fields. So even, with all of that, we should still make a healthy deposit into the unassigned fund balance. And like I said, a lot of this comes down to, we just weren't able to get the stuff that we needed because of the pandemic or whatever. So, that's where a lot of that, we didn't have a lot of events going on. The Opera House had a lot of savings because we just didn't have a lot happening. So that's where a lot of the cost savings has come from. It's just
So
being in a pandemic.
with these numbers aside, do you have any idea, ballparkish, as to how much will get turned back into the undesignated?
Pretty good number.
I thought that was on
My guess is by the time we make the TIF transfers and, assign some other things, I'm gonna say about 350,000. I mean, we have to cover what was allocated in this fiscal year's budget, which is 350,000, I believe. So that comes off that 700,000 number right off the top.
Yeah.
You add our TIF transfers into that, so we're probably looking at between 250 and 350,000.
I mean, I don't know how you guys feel, but I would think we would be better stewards of the town's money by turning in a smaller dollar number than we are turning in $250,000 after we encumber a bunch of stuff. Just keeping that in mind going into the upcoming budget.
And I would, as the new person who has to spend the money, I would also say that this is an odd year that you just ended in June, where you created a budget in the middle of a pandemic, not knowing what
What you're
that was
gonna
going to
look
be.
like, right.
I think you probably did the best you could, not really knowing the future.
Well, you had a year
No.
before that too with the actual onset of
Right.
it, so,
Right.
Yeah.
it's,
Yeah, so I think you can, I'm not saying you throw it out, but I think, and there'll probably be a different look at everything this year anyway, just because somebody else is signing the letter. But,
And we have to remember too, what state our unassigned fund balance is currently in. We are dangerously approaching the need to take out a tax anticipation note. Only magnified by the fact that we have $1.5 million in damage because of a storm in October. So if we don't get FEMA funding, if we don't find another way to fund those repairs, we're gonna have to look at outside options just to make it through the fiscal year. Because we don't have that unassigned fund balance.
That's a great point.
I had a question too,
Sort of
though.
take- oh, go
Sorry.
ahead. No, you go ahead.
On your liability for accrued benefits that you're stating, is that retirement or like unpaid vacations?
Unpaid
or-
vacation, sick, earned time off.
Right. Just wanted to clarify which one it was.
right,
We don't have an unpaid retirement liability.
Okay.
We pay that every week with payroll.
Right, that's what I thought. That's why I figured it was sick and vacation and stuff. That's a lot of unpaid time.
But this is only a small portion of that.
Yeah.
I sort of do take Mark's point, that item 7 seems to be a little bit of an outlier in terms of the general nature of what these encumbrances are, that we are creating a reserve for something that's, it's just road salt, it's just winter road maintenance in a different kind of way than I think of. And I'm not necessarily opposed to it, but it just seems to be of a different nature than,
well, and if we're gonna do this, I think we should also set some sort of limit as to what the reserve can be.
But the reserve policy would do that. So for every reserve that's established, it has very specific purposes that it can be used for, and it can only be used for that purpose. You also set a limit on how much can be sitting in that reserve account, and you can restrict how it's funded, whether it's funded by donations, funded by money that's left over in the previous fiscal year, or funded by direct appropriations in the budget. So you would set all of those parameters when you
Part of that
adopt the
So this is
changes
sort
to
of
the
a
reserve
new
policy.
action to create a new reserve that we historically haven't done.
And it would be funded with this money,
Yeah.
To start it.
And is that the only one we're doing that on? for this?
correct?
And let me just briefly talk about that, the idea of using a reserve in this way. Part of the challenge with, operating budget as it is for something like road salt, you see those peaks and valleys of what you use, right? It's a warm year, it's a cold year, it's snowy, so you don't use as much salt. You have constant freeze thaw, so you're using a lot of salt. So the ability to create a reserve that allows you to effectively fund ahead what the year is going to be, as opposed to guessing what it might be, and then only seeking funding in future years to cover what you had spent the prior year. So there's somewhat cost certainty for the taxpayer in terms of what that is. We know how many miles of road we have. We know roughly how many tons we use on average. And whatever the policy might be for that reserve policy, we can craft that in such a way that says, okay, this is what we think it takes for us to, on an average year, or maybe 10% more than an average year, whatever that is. And then we say, oh, it's a warm year, we only have to fund 50% of that, so we didn't use as much. Or it was a bad year, we used it all up, and we went over that line. The ability for us to know ahead, have more cost certainty in a budget like roads, I think that will benefit us greatly down the road, as opposed to kind of the wild swings that you sometimes can see in that end of the budget, so.
If you guys say it makes sense,
We'll try. If it's a loser, you guys can do what you need, yeah.
All right, any other comments, thoughts? All right, do we have a motion?
Let's see, I move the board authorize the finance director to proceed forward as written. Did I get that right?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
with the memo and,
Okay. Yes, I'll say that. I move the board authorize the finance director to proceed forward as written.
we have a second?
Yeah, I'll second it.
Okay. Any other discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Okay,
I'll go with approval.
okay, I have 3 in favor, 1 opposed.
It's all still our money, right? We're just putting it in different
Just putting in
buckets.
different buckets.
Correct.
Great.
Well, it's the same bucket, it's the use that it was intended for. It's just you were
being
either
moved from
carrying
one
it
year to another.
forward or putting it in a reserve account.
Would it not be?
Doesn't, in my memory, might be a little shady here, but don't these encumbered items normally come to us in July, August? I mean, this does seem to be quite a ways after the fact, but isn't there a normal time that they've come before us before that I remember?
Well, with a prior town manager, he felt that he didn't need to bring them to you at all, so you haven't seen them in a few
I was gonna
years.
say, I've never seen them.
Yeah,
so-
well-
And, before that, we have to get through the fiscal year. We also have about 2 months worth of invoices that we get for the prior fiscal year and the new fiscal year. And then we have to go through the process of closing out those books and looking for oddities in terms of what hasn't been spent, where are we, and then it leads us to this.
So for us to better help our auditors, would it be better for us to have this stuff, say, in August, so that they can look at it and make a fine tuning of their report?
Finance, doing it
He
from
has,
an
they
account.
don't, they're not starting the audit for 21 until January.
No, but they're supposed to have it done by December. I think that was our prior agreement. I assume
Well,
the current one is,
it all went out the window when COVID hit.
well, I'm just saying.
Because they couldn't get on schedule and everybody's been off.
Correct.
So.
But count going forward,
Going forward, so you could, usually, my experience with encumbrances, it's usually a fall. It's a fall conversation.
So
When your
August.
auditors are here, or they've either just left, or just before they're getting here.
I guess what I'm saying is I'd like to certainly see it long before December.
Yeah, I think October would probably be about,
We also didn't have our audit until this week, from a prior year, so
Right,
we are in an auditing,
All
I
right.
guess, is what I'm saying, and I think you'll see that next time, yeah.
I do have a question though on that. Overall, on, back to your liabilities. If that's all unpaid, when we budget for the salary of, say, $100,000 and they don't take the time and then it rolls over, it's like, shouldn't it kind of already be built into the budget? Or is it money that they can carry, weeks that you can carry forward? I don't know your
that you
payroll
can
process.
carry. So depending on when you are hired, there's different limits to your vacation and sick time that you can carry.
Oh, okay.
And we have a lot of employees that have been here a really long time, and they are at the max limits, which
Yeah, I was gonna
causes
say.
us to have a huge liability in terms of vacation and sick time that's carried over.
Might be a policy that might need to be reviewed to avoid that problem, because I know other cities have gotten in trouble with that.
Which is why we have made a valiant effort to make sure that the liability is funded.
Right.
So looking at, the public safety part of it and the public works part of it, we should be in the
Somewhere in the,
$30,000 range.
Which in years past, we've budgeted $30,000 a year.
It's never been properly taken care of. I mean,
No, which is why we've had to budget so much over the last few years to try to get us to, when we started doing this, we were $132,000 underfunded. So we've made huge strides in making sure that liability is reduced.
and we do have some inclination of people that will be getting done
Yeah.
in the very near future that could chew up all of what we have and then some.
Right.
So,
And to your point, Eric, there have been multiple changes in personnel policies.
I figure, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we have one employee who's 40-plus years.
Right, so they're in that
Wow.
old,
Yeah.
yeah, I know.
You get
it's-
new guys like me, it's like, what's the
Right.
sense, so.
And when you have an employee that has 400 hours of earned vacation time, 400 hours of paid sick leave that we'd pay out when they get done,
Right,
that adds up really quick.
oh, yeah, I
it's
know,
all accrued at $15 an hour and
yeah, right, and then now they're earning
Right.
a lot more. Yeah, it's just, at some point you have to we have to look at getting that under, maximum is this, and if you don't use it, we buy it out at that point, so it's within that budget, or you lose it. I mean, that's policy we're under, a lot of places do that.
Right.
And there is a reason for it, but I always encourage people to take their vacations so you don't burn out.
Absolutely, take your vacations.
Yep.
Okay, any final comments on
No,
that? So we
I'm
can
done.
get moved
Go
on?
away.
Okay, great. Then we are going to move on to acting on the harbor fee schedule, and Abby is here. So, John, Abby, who would like to give us a rundown?
I think, why don't do you want to try, or do you want me to try?
stand here and, yeah, no,
Oh, my goodness,
I'll
John,
start.
how
I
are you
would
doing?
love
So
to try,
anyway,
but it's not happening.
it's all right, it's all right. So, the harbor committee you just throw something at me
Okay.
if I
Got it.
don't speak, or just throw something at me.
Got it.
So the harbor committee met last month, and they took action to approve the harbor fee schedule as presented. In fact, Eric, I think, was at the meeting. We kind of came up with a capital planning workshop. And so the base fee for moorings for a resident is set to increase by 50% to $150. The river dinghies are set to increase by $25. Rack space for kayaks is increasing by $50 to $100 depending upon resident, non-resident. Tie-offs are increasing by $50, and there's an increase for the commercial boat operator permit fees. So, and I had a little comment here, I just, the way I look at this fee schedule is really, it's kind of a completion of funding the year and the priorities of the budget you've already established. So, Abby and I have had some conversations and about, some different things and whatnot. And we had a pretty robust capital plan and a lot of items that were in there. I don't look at this as part of that kind of package. I look at this as really as its own thing. And it's really meant to fund the priorities of the existing year. But clearly there's some significant change from one year to the next. I think there are still calls, and we heard it from members of the budget committee who was concerned about, is there enough here? Are we charging enough here? But I think that the harbor committee made a pretty valiant effort to try to hear those concerns and respond. So these are the fees that they have approved, and if you so approve them,
I'm throwing something at you.
please do it.
One of the things I did, excuse me, if I go low, maybe I can talk. Okay, I'm gonna go really low, lower than my normal voice. The one of the ways in which to increase revenue but not have as much impact on the taxpayer is on the overnight dockage, which we've seen a considerable increase this year as well, and it went up, considerably. So that number went from $3.50 a foot for 60 footers and over to $6 a foot.
Yeah.
So that was the committee and myself feel really strongly that, that's an area that we can, that impacts residents the least, but will increase revenue the most. So I was pretty pleased with that thinking. And I just thought I would squeak that along.
That's good.
So,
Sorry.
I spoke to Jonathan about the possibility of using another piece of our property for boat storage in the winter months.
Yep.
Out at the Marge Jones
Yep.
field. It's closed.
Right.
I don't know whether we could attract more people that might want to use that
Yeah.
or a portion of that. Knowing fair well that they'd have to be out in the spring, but, maybe it isn't the same rate that we charge at the harbor because of its
Off-site,
location.
yep.
Right.
But yet again, we'd be providing more of a service to those that might want it. I mean, have we thought about other places for storage?
I mean, you and I really kind of tossed that around in the office, and I hadn't pursued that, too much further other than knowing that we have a deadline in the back of our minds in terms of the bridge and what that might mean for winter storage when that bridge work happens.
Yeah.
2045 at this point, who knows? That would be, we need an answer well in time for that. But we hadn't really had a chance to sort of vet that solution quite yet, but
And is that winter storage, is that monthly? Is that
It's
annually?
It's annually.
Okay.
But it's, the length times beam, so I was looking at like our sailboat, that'd be $1,000 for the winter.
Okay.
When I first got here, it was by linear foot, which didn't make any sense at all.
Right,
It's
yeah,
like,
because you're taking up more than
Trimaran
your
was paying what a 30-foot
gotcha
sailboat was
by
paying.
square foot, yeah.
The one thing I would caution about looking elsewhere for boat storage is, like Rockport Marine had to put in, I think it was like a $50,000 catch basin because they store boats and they pressure wash boats there. So there would just have to be a pretty extensive things of what they could not do on the boat
Oh,
storage.
gotcha, yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's obvious.
You have to like make them
That's-
sign their life away.
I mean, that's obvious that these places, they wouldn't have the electrical or the water hookups. I mean,
Right.
it's just a place to put it for the winter months and
They
then
wouldn't be
you,
able to sand, they wouldn't be able to scrape, and
Right.
that would just be something I would, just throw out there to,
All good things to consider.
Yeah, and would be
but revenue,
competing
yes.
with our businesses.
Right.
Or I'd be concerned about liability. Because what keeps people from going in there just because it's closed? I see people there all the time when
Well,
it's closed.
about as much as it does down by the bridge.
Right.
Right, true.
Right,
No.
but at least tends to be people around here. In there, you're in the middle of the woods. That would be my concern. I mean, there's nothing to protect us, and then are we liable as a town because somebody goes in and spray paints a boat? Or is it, that would be my concern.
Yeah, I think, Mike, there could come a time, and whenever the state gets its act together of sorts and is ready to put together a plan together for us, there's going to be, I don't know how many boats, but there will be, I don't want to say homeless for the winter, but they'll be lacking a place to be,
Right.
because likely the DOT is going to say, look, we need all this space, and so
Yeah.
it was, originally it started as a Plan B conversation, and then, is it maybe 1A and 1B, so is it a little higher up on the list, but, it's, there, as I said, I think it needs to be vetted a little bit more, but I think these are good
I think
thoughts.
these are good
Not,
steps.
not opposed to finding a location for people to store their boats and having revenue from it, just security to me, I mean, we're talking a lot of money sitting there without any kind of security would be
Yeah.
my biggest concern.
Makes sense.
Abby, can you just tell me, because I don't know, what's a season guide?
Season guide would be that, one season guide we have right now is Main Sport. So they actually get, take,
Kayak trips.
They take the,
Oh, gotcha, okay.
How about commercial passenger vessels?
commercial passenger vessels are essentially charter boats, but
Okay.
not ones that we have a lease with.
So like
We only
Harvest
have
Moon or,
The one lease, yes, so Harvest Moon was the one that we had in the past. He's now since gone to Camden. So, there's a couple of others that just come and go. Anybody picking up passengers for hire off of the dock, pay us that.
at each time.
Either each time or seasonal.
Or seasonal, okay.
And it's something the committee's really looking at, as if we have a lot of applications for those permits, how many do we want to allow? There's a lot of forethought. We haven't gotten there yet, but in thinking like, okay, are we going to have to cap that with all of our uses as our uses continue to increase?
Yeah, which is great. That's
Yeah,
what we
which is
can-
not a bad problem to have.
Yeah. Okay, great.
Well, I move the board approve the harbor fee schedule as presented.
second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? All right. Thank you, Abby. Hope you feel
Don't mind, I'll
better.
get
Yeah,
my
thanks.
germs out of here, which are not
Yes.
COVID. And,
Thank you.
Yes, get better.
Yes,
yes.
get better. Thank you.
And Sunday night.
Sunday night.
Sunday night,
5:30,
fireworks,
rain or
without a
shine.
doubt.
Just,
See,
you
now
know,
you're
That's
Says
right.
so.
We're doing it.
it was looking good.
All right.
Thanks, Abby.
Thanks, Abby. Okay, next is to act on the parking task force mission. So John, I'm gonna turn that to you.
Okay, so there's somewhat a 1A, 1B on this. So we have these two task force. We have the RES task force and we have the parking task force. And the mission, we have this new committee policy we've established this fall. And in that, it really sort of lays out what the priorities are and how a task force works. And so what I was hoping for is to really put both of these items back on your radar so that we could somehow make sure everybody's in the same category and everyone's swimming the right way, or whatever the analogy we want to use is. We've had, Denise had sent in some questions about, where we stand and where we going, and I said, boy, that's a good question, and I'd spoken with Chief Gagné about the idea of working on the parking ordinance this winter, and he had pledged when he came back from his vacation during November to come back and start working on these items. But it seemed important that this is an item that, I've been here 5 months, almost 6 months, and so it's an idea there was a lot of work that had gone into over the last 18 months or year, and it really hadn't kind of crawled back to the top of the list for this group. And so I thought it was important that I just, zero in on this mission, make sure the mission of this group is where it should be and where it's headed, and then, we're back off to the races as a.
So I guess my question is, has it not come back or bubbled back because maybe we don't need it at this point. I mean, there hasn't been a lot of,
I think it's critical. People in the village,
Yeah.
and not just the village, but Rockport residents. I mean, I think the reason and one of the concerns with the hotel from the get-go was the parking. And if we want to have whatever kind of development we have in the downtown area, I think our residents need to feel like the town is addressing parking in a sensible way in the village. I mean, even just to start with, this parking ordinance we already have says it's all 2-hour parking. Well, nothing's posted. So who knows who's parking there for how long? So we've lost really, potentially we lose good parking spaces that could be people coming in, using our businesses and leaving. Could be there all day for all we know.
Well, and we don't have anybody now going down and telling the Smiths, please have your people park somewhere else. I mean, that's been brought up before, and I mean, it doesn't hurt to get down and just sort of fortify that. I mean, there were cars double parked across from the old corner shop. One parked way back in the parking spot, and then another one parked directly in front of it, but they're working over here. I mean, there needs to be some communications. I know it's gonna be finished sometime next summer, but it's a long time between now and then, and our streets need to be taken care of in the wintertime, and so on and so forth. But, I also realize, do we need some? We have street issues, not necessarily parking issues. Our streets aren't wide enough to properly handle a proper width and length. We would lose parking if we pursued this with any great vigor. And, we've got other things that are going on, with the fire station in West Rockport. I mean, we're gonna be spending money like a drunken sailor. Where do I want to put it? I'd rather put it in a fire station at this time than I would to talk about building a parking lot.
Although, Bar Harbor had $2 million in revenue from their paid parking.
Well, you're right, but this isn't Bar Harbor. I mean, it's good to use them as an example because they're a tourist town, but the volume of traffic that goes there and stops
Considerably
is
different.
Yeah.
far greater than what it
Right.
is here.
Yeah, although
And,
Camden's also.
so then
looking to pay.
with the idea of having the parking meters and having it regulated, somebody then has to take care of that. Who gets to do that? Do you need to hire another person that goes and does that and takes in the money from the meters? Or is it a card one? I mean, there's more costs associated with it rather than just putting your meter
Well, I
post
think-
on the street and,
And I think that's the point, in my view, that's sort of the point of the task force, and what we'd hoped we would hear back on was, one of the first questions was, how many parking places do we have? And
I
then,
guess my question is, how come we haven't gotten there already? I mean, this task force has been in
we haven't heard of
effect
people.
I
for
haven't heard a
a
word.
long time, and
Right.
I haven't heard a word. Other than I know that we paid for a study about a parking lot down in this area, down here.
But then
But-
nothing.
I haven't heard anything else, which leads me to believe, I mean, not that I'm, against the fact that, does Rockport have a parking problem? Yes. Have we had a parking problem forever? Yes. Is it going to be, worse over the next couple of years? Probably. But we've had this task force and no one here has heard anything
We
at
had,
this
right,
point,
and
so.
right, we've had a couple of hard years where, we haven't been able to meet.
Exactly, yep.
There's been difficulties with respect to that, but I think the parking committee may have been started back in 19 even. So there's been plenty of time to hash things out, or at least come back and wave the flag saying, hey, we're still here, what do you want us to do? And that's not
pretty
been.
heavy on town staff, I think, on that committee.
I think so, yeah. I
They
think
just,
Who's even on it?
there's a
Nobody
lot of,
making
a lot of
it.
staffers are part of, I think had been part of it, and I think we've certainly had some changeover, Bill Maypower, I think, previously was on there, and, I don't know, have you ever attended a parking committee?
I've attended and I did some work for him,
Yeah,
and we got some numbers and we created a map for him and all that business, and then it just kind of died off. And mainly whenever Bill Post resigned, it really died off.
So there's a map
Bill-
somewhere.
Yeah. And I'll send that to you, John.
Yeah,
You can
that'd be great.
Circulate to them. And it, because have you seen, like in Booth Bay, they got that little infographic map kind of showing where everything is? I thought that'd be kind of neat to have here. you know, putting something like that here. Camden does it as well. There's a company you can go through to kind of showcase everything in their little cartoon version of the such. So I put something together in some Photoshop, just showing like kind of an idea of what we could do. And I mean, it looked pretty good. And then, you know, Bill Post left. And then we just hadn't met since then. I'm not the staff liaison for that. I think it's Randy, but Randy's been busy as all get out with other things, so.
Yeah, I mean, personally, my personal feeling is the amount of effort that's gonna require to keep this going to give us anything, right? So we could say, yes, we wanna keep this going, but if we're getting the same results that we're having now, then what's the purpose of?
And
Well, I think it's a
Doing it.
critical need, and just because of the people who were with it, it's a combination of resignations, drop the ball, too busy, then shouldn't we look at some other people who, I mean,
Potentially, but,
yeah, I mean, and I'm not saying we should build a Cadillac of a parking lot at all. I mean, I've heard that there's a lot of spaces, Kramer Park could be reconfigured and we could gain some real parking there. Even just posting the parking. So it's really, maybe there's some really low dollar things we can do to improve the parking situation. Accessibility for tourists, accessibility for our own residents.
So, even if, you know, this parking task force really got everything together, we wouldn't have the money to pay for anything to solve anything at the moment. But
right,
the comprehensive plan committee, it's gonna be tucked in there about parking. And so they're going to be addressing it as well. So at some point, that committee is going to be
well,
meeting
and
with
it's,
people.
so it's not, it will be
having
covered there.
Yeah,
It will be covered as part of planning board coming up, right?
Right.
So do we then have overlap? I'm just trying to understand, like, do we need another task force? Do we need, I mean, I know this one is already in existence, but do we need another task force? Do we need another committee? It sounds like we have, through comprehensive plan, through planning board, there'll be plenty of discussion about parking.
Well, we can discuss parking, but, but could we have something, make a few changes through the course, so next summer things are a little, I mean, if there's parking available and it's just reconfiguring Kramer Park and it's a couple public works guys and I don't even know
Right,
what,
again, though, but do you need a task force to do that, or do you cover this through the other? I don't know, I'm asking, like, do you
Yeah.
cover it through what the planning board recommends, or what the comprehensive plan recommends? Do you cover it through that versus covering it through a task force? I don't know, I don't know the answer to that.
Well, and I think we also had a resident who lives right across, you know, right at the corner here of Union Street and Central Street, you know, who came in and had some concerns about parking and striping and all that. So I think my initial thought when we were entering this winter and having spoken with Chief about this, his sense was that the ordinance needs an overview. It needs a good look through. It's been some years since we've done that. And that there's some work that has to go into that. Now, if we were going to undertake some sort of significant, you know, Bar Harbor style, or I'm not too familiar with Booth Bay's, how they came about with that, but if we were to go through some sort of you know, effort like that, might that be redundant? And his sense was, well, if we're going to go there, maybe that's a redundancy from, and we shouldn't work on the ordinance. We should just start working in a direction towards that. I mean, I think that there are a lot of balls in the air right now.
Right.
A lot of plates spinning, whatever analogy you want to use, whatever metaphor you want to use. There's a lot that's going on.
And I have a sense there'll be more. I
Well,
mean,
and I, you know, I'll be the elephant in the room. There's the optics that we'd be doing the parking, for instance, to help out someone that might be in need of parking. We won't mention the new motel. So there's some optics that is the reason that we're pursuing parking down there. And, you know, I just don't think with the other things, with trying to get the RES property out from underneath of us in some fashion, potentially, and putting a new fire station and putting a septic system across Route 90, potentially. We have a lot of other things that, in my mind, are a little more pressing, but.
well, there was a lot of language back a year when this all started, committing to our residents that we would really carefully look at parking and do what we could to improve the situation, or at least look at it.
Just-
And if everything's just gone into this sort of dead hole, I mean, if there's been good work done, let's find out
Well,
what
and
that
I'm-
is, and
all
at
I'm
least not
saying-
lose the benefit of
All
that.
I'm saying is just be careful what you wish for, because if you take, for instance, from the library up to Smith's, Smith's, I call it Smith's Garage, but up to Grafham's, I mean, technically, there is no parking on either side of that street because there isn't enough room.
Right.
So you can eliminate it on one side and add some on the other because you've taken one side's width and put it over here. But the minute you open that can of worms and start to ask questions, you're going to probably lose more than you would ever gain. Just my 2 cents.
Well, I don't know, maybe, I feel like we did make a commitment to our residents that we would look into parking. We formed the task force, and just because it didn't do its job, or even, I mean, maybe it did, we just don't know.
But I think we're still listening to I mean, I think I don't think that we're saying we're not listening to that. I mean, I think we're doing it comprehensive plan, we're doing it planning
Yeah, but
board, we're
comprehensive
doing all
plan will
these
be next
other.
summer. I guess I'm just thinking this coming summer, is there anything that,
Well,
maybe
even
we
if,
just see what
even if we
Orion's
came up,
got.
I mean, even if we came up an idea, could we fund it by this summer? Probably not. I don't know.
You know, and
depends on what the funding
I
is.
guess,
Is it a couple
right.
signs, is it,
Don't know.
I-
Right.
And I don't think, you know, frankly, I mean, if we're honest with ourselves, it hasn't been one of our top priorities, or else we would have been on it 9 months ago. You know, instead of sitting here 9 months
Good point.
after the fact.
I blame it on me. I thought we had a parking task force. I was trusting the work was getting done. And then it's, you know, it's like, okay, I've been asking questions like, where does that stand? What's happening with that?
Well, yeah, I mean,
So
that,
now we find out
but
that.
that should have been a board discussion ages ago. I mean, you've been asking questions, but as a board, we didn't know that it hadn't been.
Right.
Right.
And so it hasn't been one of our top priorities to even say, hey, you know, where are they? How come they haven't been doing it?
Well, we have a work product that we could at least see what that is and go from there, maybe.
Mhm, true. Okay, so how do we want to handle this motion? Revisit, look at the work?
Let's look at the
Let's try to
work and-
determine what's been done so far.
And who is still on, who is still working at, who's on the task
We-
force
I
or was
think
on the
we'll-
old?
Small number.
Okay,
Yeah.
so
I know
let's
it's a
figure
small
that out
number.
first, right?
Yeah.
Who's
Yeah.
on the task force and
Yeah.
what's been done thus far?
Yeah.
And then let's bring it
We
back
could
in
look at it.
January.
We could look at it during our workshop,
Yeah,
maybe,
we
when
can
we're
do
doing the
that too.
capital improvement
Right.
plan. We can throw that in for 10 minutes, and we can then decide
Mm-hmm. Then
what
we
to
can
do.
bring this back,
And, because we're just rehashing the same thing
right?
here,
Because we don't
so-
know. I mean.
Yeah, there's
Right.
been some work done.
And then we can still keep to the commitment that we're looking at it.
Yep,
Right.
And then we
exactly.
can make a decision after, because I know nothing. I mean, that
And
was all
something may
before me,
change based
so
on the
I don't
hotel
know.
decision
Right.
too.
Right,
So,
exactly.
what the motion ought to be then is to table it
Yeah.
until a future date. I mean, do we want to pick a date or just say table it for the time being?
I don't think we have to do any sort of formal motion, do we? I mean, if we just aren't going to adopt this motion? Or do we want a record of,
I just think we bring it back to the January 10th meeting. And
And
then by that
meanwhile, we'll have
time,
gotten-
in the meantime, we need to get who's on the who's on the task force, what's been done so far,
Well,
so we
and-
can make a
And
decision.
where we are with the modification of the parking
Exactly,
ordinances.
right.
I mean, where are we?
yeah, we could
halfway?
get a copy of the old ordinance.
It isn't much,
Out
I
of-
can tell
Out
you.
of,
Will the planning
Out
board
of
be meeting
curiosity-
between now and then on this, or?
I don't know, do you know, John? The planning board meets between now and then, okay.
And I probably wouldn't expect on having any sort of definition.
No, I know, I was just curious to see if they come up with any thoughts or
Yeah.
more ideas in
so
between.
Eric, you asked if the planning board would meet between now and then. They meet on, this Thursday, the 16th.
You know, Are they gonna discuss the pushback here on the parking, or?
No.
Okay.
No, okay,
So
well,
we
that's
won't
what
have
I meant,
anything
is
for
it,
Study.
Okay.
are they gonna do any thought work on that? Then we
No,
can include that
um,
in what we're gonna look at again, but if
No.
they're not, then we'll just look at what's done,
Yeah.
and then we talk
And
about
then
it
we
later.
can make our decision, okay.
And then I can get up to speed on
That
what's going
sounds
on
like a
too.
good approach.
Perfect.
All right, let's move on to the RES task force. So, John?
Did-
So, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, didn't we talk about this before? And, I mean, I asked Doug what happens if it doesn't pass in November, and we talked about, well, it's going to,
Right.
and our job in the future is going to be
Right.
help them.
Right?
Yep.
So isn't that already something that's understood, or do we need to
We
memorialize
just need
that?
to memorialize it and
Yes.
make it official,
That's-
correct? To
that's
run
where we
through
are.
2022.
And the other piece that was discussed at that time was who does the RES task force report to? And presently,
Correct.
they report to the Economic Development Committee, and I believe there was some conversation, is that what this board wants to see or not?
I'd rather,
So, I just want to clarify, that's really the purpose of these two, is
Okay.
let's
Alright.
just clarify everything, let's get everything out, and let's,
Yeah.
move it
I-
ahead. if we
so,
can.
so nothing gets lost in conversation, I'd almost rather have them report directly to the board.
And that's
I
what
mean-
this does, as I read it.
Yes, that's what this does. Has them report to the board.
Yeah, because at this
think that's
point, it
clear.
isn't dealing through the economic committee,
Right.
because
Right.
we're discussing public input now.
Yeah.
All right,
I think
so-
that makes that clearer.
I move the board establish the RES task force with the mission to provide advice and counsel to the board in determining future disposition of the RES property. The task force shall report to the select board and shall sunset December 31st, 2022.
Yeah, second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Great. Okay. Liquor license renewal, special amusement and off-premise catering, backup.
This came about as a request from our town clerk, who was looking for someone to sign I think it was a liquor license renewal. And it's just one of those situations where, bless you,
Excuse me.
Bless
in
you.
the absence of the chief, and in many cases, we have backup, and there's a backup for a backup for a backup. In this case, we currently don't have a backup, and so she had requested that we appoint someone. It could be the sergeant, it could be the town manager, it could be, the police chief's designee, but there should be someone authorized so that if the aliens were to come and take Chief Gagné away, there's a number two we can tap. So
Well, I guess if whoever covers for the chief when he's out, which I believe is Sergeant Moore, it would make sense for me that he would cover that task as well.
that works from yeah.
Yeah, I don't want you spending your time on.
No, I don't think you should have to spend your time, and I think if that's something that can be delegated to whoever is covering every other police duty, then that would work for me.
Just so that it doesn't, we don't want to put anybody's name
I
there.
think we just put the
Yeah,
sergeant, right?
Department sergeant.
Yeah,
And that's someone different than the chief's designee?
Well, it will be, because we're going to tell them.
because we're gonna tell him it's the
So
sergeant.
it's really all the same person, yeah.
Yeah,
Could be. but, yeah.
okay.
So, I move the board authorize Rockport's police sergeant to approve liquor license renewal applications, special amusement permit applications, and off-premise catering permit applications in the absence of the police chief.
Okay, second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Great, thank you, passes. 7:30 something, 8 maybe, I guess?
I don't know.
Okay.
7:38.
Okay, thank you. All right, next item is to act on rescinding the Opera House Committee Establishment Ordinance. We have decided there's no longer an Opera House Committee, so I guess this is just formally
Yeah, because
rescinding that ordinance. So,
I move the board rescind the Opera House Committee Establishment Ordinance.
Second.
any discussion? All in favor? All right, that takes us to the end of our action items. The next item is discussion item for the library steam bank wall proposal, and Doug Cole has joined us for that. So Doug, we are ready for you.
I was
got
That
it.
is one.
right.
When you want opinions. Thanks for inviting me back, I appreciate it. I apologize ahead of time, I was supposed to have a handheld microphone so that with my slide deck, I could go over and point things out. But I guess that's not gonna be possible, so we'll just go along as best we can without it. Rather than rehash the history, I think you're all familiar with what we've been talking about over at the library. I was here in this past spring, and today I'm here to give you an update on what we've been doing over the summer and the fall with regards to the Boulder Slope project, as we refer to it. So I'll give you that update and then give you folks an opportunity to ask questions. And then at the end of that, I hope the board will authorize Jonathan to move ahead into the next phase, which would be sort of the contracting and financing part of the project. I see in your folders you have pictures, which is good. That'll help. Bruce, can you call up the slides?
I had no slides, sir.
I'll email you.
No one told me anything about it.
I was gonna say, the whole time, the schedule has not been, the agenda has not been on either of the
Okay,
two
well,
screens either.
we'll kind of move along the best we can. So, over the summer, Will Gartley, the engineering firm, Terry Dewan, the landscaping architect firm, and the donors, who are Griff and Linda Lesher, have been working to update the preliminary plan that we showed you this past spring. And we did and arrived at pretty close to a final plan. And at that point, last month, I took that plan to the Parks Committee to get their blessing before we brought it to the Select Board here. The Parks Committee made two significant suggestions, which I'll go over here with you. The first is pretty mundane. It just has to do with maintenance. This is a pretty steep area, and to have us old folks out there weeding and watering would have been a little bit difficult. And the resolution to that was the Leschers kindly agreed to provide the maintenance for the first 2 to 3 years. So it'll be done professionally with one of our landscaping crews, and they also plan to install an irrigation system. So the maintenance part of it was pretty easy to take care of. The next issue they had, and it was the most important, really had to do with safety. If you'll look at your diagrams there, they were worried that it still is a steep area, and if there were children up on that patio, they could start to play and perhaps fall down the slope. Yeah, why don't you go back to that other slide? That'll be the best. And so with that, I want the site plan. Yeah, right there, that's good. So what landscape architect did was he had several conversations with Scott Bickford, the code enforcement officer. And I'm going to step away from the microphone for a minute. Maybe I'll speak louder so that people at home can hear. But the two areas that they were concerned about was here.
That's cool. It points
Yeah,
on
we've
this
got
one
it on
too.
this one too, Doug.
He's got it, yep.
Over here, and then this little area here. So, after talking with Scott Bickford, the resolution is that immediately at the time of construction, they would put in a stainless steel wire fence that met code. So you'd have the 3-inch spacing between the wires, and it would extend between, well, where you see it there on the drawing, from the wall on the one side over to the bench, and then a similar wire fence on the other side of the bench up to the side of the building. But in addition to that, there'd also be plantings of a hedge that would eventually grow up and hide the stainless steel wires, which aren't particularly attractive, but it would add a second layer of safety to keep kids off the slope.
And it would match the guy wires on the utility pole, so.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So
Going for the
aesthetically,
industrial
that's
look
right.
anyway.
And the fence, right now, you'll remember we have a granite bench up there that doesn't have a back on it. So the plan is to have a custom-made bench that does have a fairly high back on it, again, to discourage people from trying to get to the other side of it.
Where's the existing bench gonna go?
Wherever,
Your backyard?
my backyard.
Yeah, no, I'm just wondering, I mean, you know, we're
Yeah.
always
We'll
looking
find
for
a good
benches
place for
for,
Right.
Yeah, it's part of our bench program for the
That's
Parks
right.
Committee. So, you know, I could go over and sort of point things out, but maybe the best thing to do now is just sort of open it up to any questions you might have, and might be the most efficient way to approach it.
Well, it looks beautiful. It's such a nice
It
improvement.
does look very nice.
So generous of,
Well, Ryan, maybe you can
Absolutely.
call up the visuals of the, yeah. And does that slide down at all? Can you, yeah, no. Yeah, okay. So I had one more.
Yeah.
yeah, with the.
Yeah,
Yeah, that
okay.
looks, that looks
So that's
fine.
actually the envisioned finished product right there, and I'm gonna again step away from the microphone. So this is the area here that would have the
The wire.
cabling and the
yeah.
hedge, and the same thing over here. The stonework here was designed so that it would match the existing stonework here, and if you go back up again to the 5 different pictures. This just again shows the sort of stonework that we have, and the plan would be to match all of that. This, of course, was just the vision that we came across that the donors really liked that look, and so we used that to guide our vision for this slope.
Yeah, I think the plans are great. The vision is great, and the very generous donation is fantastic.
I think to explain to people sort of, you know, all of this work now has been done off-site by Gartley, the landscape architects, and it's been paid for by the Leschers. But things get a little bit more complicated now, because if we get the authorization to move ahead, you're gonna have a contractor on town property doing work. And this is where Jonathan comes in, because he's gonna have to put together all of the contracts that address liability, performance guarantees. But again, I feel confident John can put that together for us. So,
So it says we need to endorse the concept.
well,
I wasn't sure the language, so.
Yeah.
yeah, I think
So we're not approving any contracts.
No,
We
no.
really are just
giving John the
giving
go-ahead.
John,
Yeah.
supporting John in his ability to create whatever is needed in order to get someone on town property.
That's right.
Okay.
Right.
That's right.
Very
Eh,
supportive of this.
Yeah, and get it on town property, but complete the project
Yep, oh, right,
and get it
exactly.
paid for.
Yeah,
Right, right. And that's, you know, just to weigh in on this, that point alone, you know, obviously, this is, as Doug mentions, I mean, this is our liability, this is our project. These are our contractors, these are the people who work on the town's behalf to complete this project. Were it not for this incredible generosity, none of this would occur.
Right, we wouldn't be able to
You
make
know,
this happen.
so we're glad to use our skills and abilities to help manifest that, but it's an unbudgeted project.
Right.
But thank goodness we have residents and citizens who want to work towards this end, at a variety of levels.
Is there any expectation on any employee, like say Mike, to be there to supervise this?
Yes, we've drawn Mike into the loop now, and clearly he's the town representative on a project
Yeah,
like
I
this.
mean, we all know that he's busy.
He is, he is.
Yeah, and I don't think, is there an expectation that he's not gonna be overseeing it, or, I mean, what do you?
Well, that's what I'm worried about, is that what the expectation of him, does he just go and make sure they're wearing their hard hats, or is he there making sure the depth of the plants are?
No.
I think the idea is that when we have a spec that's put out and we've hired someone, you know, it'll be an all hands on deck situation. There are parts of this that Ben will take on as part of the library, the bench, the cabling, making sure that it's safe, making sure that it's suitable for patrons of the library. There's portions of this, and as you all well know, that Mike has taken on just from his experience in the construction world and knowing how to get things done.
Yep.
It will probably be a number of different hands on this. And let's just hope we're not asking for my experience in terms of where to place granite and the like. But we have, between those two, I'm fully confident we're going to have the right
The
amount
bandwidth
of,
to be able to do it.
yeah.
And Doug might be on site a day or two.
That seems unlikely. He's
So I've heard.
We never see him.
Sort of hands off.
I can't imagine.
Oh, yes. No, and I would anticipate that there'll be, Leshers, obviously they're neighbors, they care a great deal about, this in their neighborhood, and so, we're going to be open to those, those concerns all the way through, but, I think we have a good plan, we have the right experts involved who are providing good, keen insight and how to fix this problem, so, I'm very confident we're gonna have exactly the solution we need.
All right. Any other questions for Doug? Would someone like to make a motion?
I was gonna say, there's not even,
It's not really
there's not a motion
language,
made.
but
I just would, look at John and say, you've heard us, it's recorded somewhere,
Yeah. Yeah,
go ahead.
yeah, do we need to motion anything, or we can just, okay.
I think I've heard you.
Not a,
I heard you loud and clear, and we'll start working.
we don't
That'll
have
be
a
great.
contract, and we don't have to.
Well, thank you for your support, I appreciate it.
Thank you, Doug.
Doug.
You don't have to
Appreciate it.
leave, we've still got another 5 minutes or so.
Oh, you want to hear about the parking?
I don't think you were ever told not to be on you're still on it.
Okay, I just noted in the notes here that no motion is required, approval given to you to proceed,
Great, thank you.
so. Okay. What else we got here?
Your favorite one?
All right, select board liaison reports. Who wants to start first?
Well, I actually have a couple of things that has been brought to my attention.
Okay,
Number one, I will be at the Parks meeting tomorrow. I wasn't at the last one, I was employed elsewhere, in another country, let's leave it at that. So anyway, one of the things that was brought up is when these committees have their meetings, it's sometimes as much as a month before somebody can actually get the information, I'm talking about the press, to get it out there. What can we do to, and I know it's an expense because you have to have people run the live stream, but what can we do to help the public get the information sooner rather than a month down the road?
Well, yeah, it's a good question.
I mean,
Because you're lucky in some cases if it is a month between meetings.
No, I know,
Right.
but that's what I'm
You
saying.
know?
I mean, because if
Yeah.
the press is watching a live stream because they're lucky enough, maybe they are tonight,
Right.
they can report on it immediately.
Right,
But
exactly.
like tomorrow, if there's a meeting,
Right.
you have to wait until the minutes get approved.
Right.
And then that's gonna take a month, because you don't meet until the next
Right.
month. So, what type of an expense would it be for us to consider because goes back to working for the public, unlike cutting the hours back over there. But anyway, what can we do to have things live streamed? You know, have the committees meet down here instead of wherever they might want to
Yep.
meet, and have them live streamed so that there's a recording of the meeting. People can watch it, or they can play it an hour afterwards. And,
Well, and as we get into the winter months, you know, we'll be doing probably more of the remote participation and with the you know, so then we've got a lot of,
I was going to bring that up at some point, and I think also the increased incidence of COVID in
Right.
our community and our region, and at some point, does it make more sense to say this is an emergency
And allow
we
people to do their meetings.
we should have as many of our committees as possible from here on to meet remotely for a period of time.
you know, in all actuality, nobody really goes to the meetings anyway. I mean, it's.
but they are public, so
It's the
if
committee
people are
meetings,
interested,
right.
it's available.
So you could have a meeting like we are with everybody in attendance. And, but they also can watch it live from home.
Right.
Or they can watch it later, at a later date. And it can get reported out to the public by virtue of the press
Right.
in a more timely fashion.
Absolutely, yeah.
So I guess that's
I think
what I
it's
would
just-
strive for,
Yeah,
is to
I mean,
try to find a way
I think it's
to.
just scheduling and then expense of salary for
Yeah.
someone to run I mean, that's what we'd have
Yeah.
to consider
Right.
before you make any,
No, that's
have some
fine, I mean,
requirements,
but I'm
right.
just sort of exploring what
Yeah.
the costs would be associated with making ourselves more available instead of a month or two down the road.
Yeah, well, and I would say that, I would add to that, and I think I know a particular instance that, you know, you're referring to, is where we had a budget committee meeting to talk about what was going to go on the November ballot, and the press didn't attend, which is their right not to. And then, obviously, there was a lot of discussion about, well, why was this a split vote, and what happened, and why didn't, you know, go forward, and there was an email sent to the members of the committee, and there wasn't a response from that. Now, sometimes that's the chair will take that responsibility on as, okay, I'm the leader of this group. You know, why that didn't happen in that particular instance, I'm not sure. You know, usually what I would, in years past, when we weren't doing this with streaming, and I'd get a phone call the day after the meeting to tell me what happened. You know, I'm not gonna wait for the minutes, I wanna, you know, report it that way. But what you're referring to, I think, is the way that we are evolving as a town and as a society, where that is the best way for people to find out what is happening.
Well, and it can
You know.
be, you know, it's not like we would have to tie up one person's time for 5 days a week. You know, this is where we say, okay, these are the, you know, I know it's convenient for you to meet at 9 o'clock in the morning or 3 in the afternoon, but we're only gonna do it on Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday. So, you know, make some adjustments, and that way we can coordinate with someone to actually
Yeah.
do the work
Yeah.
to get it out there. But, I mean, I just,
It's a
we
good
ought,
thought. It really, I mean, it
we
is.
ought to make a little more of an effort to make ourselves more transparent, I guess. I mean, we do the planning board, we do all the other boards, let's start getting some of the committee work out there.
Well, and the other part of it too is the in-person, right? If they just meet on Zoom as they had in the pandemic era, that's live streamed, no problem. That
Yeah.
goes out to the world. It's when they meet in person and they want to have a Zoom component because 1 or 2 or 3 members are there, and we live stream in person. That's
Right.
the one we can't pull
Can't do
off
it,
quite yet.
right.
And that's
You
fine,
know.
you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just, those are the pieces to it, but I agree with you, I mean, I think people were better, in many cases, I feel as though people were better informed when everything was streamed and easily found, for even those, I mean, I wasn't here, and I was watching Parks and Beautification Committee meetings, you know, and find out how the park was going to be designed.
So that would
Just for
be,
fun.
that would be a question like tonight, how many people are watching, or how many people have watched?
4.
4.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm glad that 4 is doing it.
Yeah.
I would just as soon have 14 here.
Right,
But
right,
the more we can make ourselves available,
totally
the
agree.
better.
Yeah. A lot of that's I mean, I agree, because I keep saying, I feel like we're doing everything in a void, because there's nobody here.
Right.
So you have
True.
no public input, and then everybody wants to know why. Well, because I hear nothing, no response.
Exactly.
So it's not just us being transparent, but the public need to be engaged.
Oh, absolutely.
I'm constantly telling people, come to the meeting, or at least watch it, or
And I guess I,
send an email. I don't know.
transparency wasn't necessarily
No,
the
I
proper
agree. It is
word, but-
it is a good
Right.
word, though, because some of our
But you know,
committees
if we get
can't
that
live
email
stream.
list, we can email out saying, you know, select board meeting on the date with the link to the live stream to them, rather than making them go to the
And
website
hunt for
and
it.
hunt for
Right.
it.
Yeah,
But not that
Agree.
that.
yeah, because sometimes it's like not the easiest to find.
That is
You have
very
to
true.
know that
I get a
we're
little
governance,
confused.
not something, I mean, there's.
It is true.
And I will say, just having members of my own family having gone down to the harbor the other night for the fireworks, I also, I love them dearly, but, you know, none of them are watching, I'm sure, but, you know, I kind of said, well, you should have looked at this place or that place or the other place, and so there are some benchmarks along the way that, you know, you hit 20 places, you post it, and everyone's like, why not the 21st? The
Right,
22nd?
right, exactly.
So we have to try to make it as universal and as easy as we can, but there's just something about our culture right now where we are very, very split apart, and it's hard. It's
Yeah,
just
the communication.
It's
It
a hard
is.
thing,
It
and
is.
so for the 4 that are watching, you know,
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
you know,
Thank you.
yes,
That's right.
And but you know, let's stay in communication.
Bring a
and-
friend next month.
Popcorn.
Select board watching party.
That's
I mean, we
right.
all know what an email can do. You
Right.
get one email and we're off and
Yeah.
try to work towards that. And that's, we're here to serve, you know, all of us, different roles, so. Anyway,
All right.
I think it's a good point.
I think it's a
And,
great
you know,
point.
for the month of November, I was gone probably 18 or 20 days of it, so I have nothing, no committee work, but tomorrow we start anew.
There we go.
Well, Wednesday, sorry.
There you go.
Is it Wednesday?
Yeah, Wednesday.
Wednesday, right.
Yeah, mine's on Wednesday as well. so.
Okay, so you're good. Comprehensive plan, Orion has been leading the charge with that, and we had a fairly good turnout up in the Opera House in November. A lot of feedback from the community, which is great, so the team's been correlating all of that, and
And another note, on the online surveys, we had over 300 responses so far.
fantastic, yep.
So that's pretty good.
So, and on that note, is there any way to determine where those responses are coming from?
Yes, yes.
I mean, so where's,
And I haven't
how are
gotten,
they split up? Because I'd be interested to know whether all you're hearing from is east of Route 1, or whether it's a 50-50 split west of Route 1
yeah.
and east of Route 1.
There is a way to kind of pinpoint them through their computer.
Yeah.
Because it's
That's
all.
right, and I don't even want to know who it is. I'm just curious as to where we're hearing from. Because then we can look at that and target areas that we're not getting much of a response from.
Yep.
You know, to help bolster those things.
Yeah, I haven't looked at it because I was waiting on the survey to close. Survey's done, so
Yep.
now I can look into all that data. Yeah.
Good, great work with that. So that's my update.
Good. Let's see, Parks Committee did meet without Mark. And, you know, doing some great stuff. Doug presented one thing that we talked about. We also got a presentation on Mary Leah Park and some plans to, you know, in conjunction with the hotel and some parking issues for the hotel back there, potentially putting sort of covered parking, which would level out Mary Leah Park. One of the big issues we've seen this summer with the concert series yes, it's a scary park. I can be in my hiking boots and I'm still a little nervous going down. So some really good ideas that are Asa Pete, who did the landscaping across the street from the park there, did some conceptual drawings of some potential layouts for Mary Leah Park, where we could flatten the lower level, and then maybe up top where we have what we call the penalty box, sort of broaden that whole sidewalk along there and have a number of benches looking out over the
Yeah.
harbor, because it's such a lovely, lovely spot. And then we're working on the bench program, Apollos, a
Well,
memorial
it sounds like you
bench.
might get some granite benches.
It sounds like we'll have some
Well,
new benches
I
to
was
sell.
trying to, where's that
You can
going?
get those engraved easily.
And the 5-year plan, I think, is gonna be finalized.
Yeah, we're working on that,
Wednesday.
yep.
And I know the Conservation Committee is also doing their 5-year thing, so there's good work being done.
Yeah, lots of good work and thought put into these things. The Midcoast Internet Development Corporation had its first board meeting today, and we admitted the Rockland and Thomaston. So we now have what we call the Core Four, Camden, Rockport, Thomaston, and Rockland, and we're working on getting some grants to support community engagement, so we can help educate our communities on what we're doing and what great things we can bring to the area for high-speed internet. Let's see if, and then the library committee, as John reported, things are going great guns at the library.
Great. All right, any other topics, any other items?
Well, let me think.
And get your tickets for the Don Campbell Orchestra
yes,
Saturday night at the at the Opera House.
The Opera House,
It should be a fun,
the last
fun
event of the
They were
year.
hoping to sell tickets at the fireworks, but
Well, we know how that went. All right, do I have a motion to adjourn?
so moved.
Second?
Sure.
Okay.
Conversation.
Any discussion about that? All in favor? All right, thank you, and it is 8:06.
Right.
Do we have the concession stand yet?